Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's Fireside chat with me, Dr. Binita Kane, and my co-host,
Helen Oakleigh. Hi, filmmaker and representative of the charity Long COVID Support.
Yeah, you're watching the Long COVID Clinic What You Can Do YouTube channel, and we've got another really great session planned for you this evening. It's going to be live and interactive, so please do join in comments on the chat. Helen will be just going backstage in just a few moments, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. And of course, as always, this is going to be recorded and will be available for catch-up for anyone who's not joining us. So without further ado, Helen, I'll see you a little bit later on. And I'd like to introduce our guest for the evening. So welcome, Jess. Yeah, so Jessica Dove is a passionate patient advocate and founder of the Turnto AI platform and app. And she's joining us. I'm so grateful. She's joining us at the absolute crack of dawn from the other side of the world. Where are you? Where are you? In Australia, but whereabouts are you at the moment, Jess?
I'm in Brisbane in Australia. It's very warm, even though it's early.
Oh, well, you don't need to share that with us because it's really miserable here and really cold. But thank you so much. We do appreciate that. And thank you for audience members for joining us a little bit later this evening in the UK. So I think we'll just dive straight in, Jess. It would be really great if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've got into the space that you're working in, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, so I founded Turnto from having lived experience. I have two children actually with cerebral palsy, one with a really rare type. And I kind of look back at this one particular moment as the sort of catalyst for everything. And it was when my one son, his name is River, when he was diagnosed at 18 months, I went along to see a consultant and I actually took a big systematic review with me. I'm a bit of a geek, Binita. It was like a traffic light of all the treatments. We suspected cerebral palsy, and then this consultant turned to me and just said, there's nothing you can do to help him. You know, there's no surgeries, no medication. She even told me not to bother reading that paper that I'd taken along. So I had this very sort of strong experience of being told there's nothing we can do. And then within the next month after that, we actually tried a treatment that I'd found, and my son couldn't sit at the time, and he instantly sat. We took it all off and he sat from that day onwards. And so I just went on this journey for the next 5 years of trying to find as many things we could to help our kids. So that's really the catalyst for what we've built.
Yeah. And I feel like we're sort of kindred spirits in a sense, because obviously my interest in this area and a complete change in direction of my career came from my daughter being unwell with COVID. Very similar experience going to the NHS MECFS pediatric clinic and being told there is nothing. And I just couldn't compute it. I was like, this perfectly healthy child who's now completely housebound and unable to do anything. Like, how is this? How are you telling me that there's no information and there's nothing out there? And so I probably did it the hard way, researching, through, painfully and through books and on websites and what have you.
I started with books too, Binita.
Yeah, I literally ordered a book off the internet that had, it was written by a patient, interestingly, and it was about pacing. And that was the first introduction I'd had as a doctor to pacing for chronic conditions. So yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing what you've gone on to do. So tell us a little bit about kind of where that's led you and what you're doing.
Yeah, so that journey, in like a few sentences over the next few years, I just went on the same journey as you, reading books, papers. I say always papers out of context in the beginning. I probably still have that problem because actually it's very hard to get the full context. Joining every Facebook group, listening to 2-hour-long podcasts. We ended up traveling around the world and meeting incredible therapists and finding more and more treatments, and almost all of them had scientific teams behind them. And I ended up at a huge conference with all the world leaders for cerebral palsy. There were 1,500 academics, and it was the first time they'd ever let anyone with lived experience attend. Can you believe it?
Wow.
it's a very sort of, not all healthcare conditions allow patients at all to the table. But I was sitting in this one session with this world leader who did a huge talk on all the treatments. And I actually put my hand up and I said, I shouldn't have to fly around the world to learn about these things, particularly when many of these are free interventions. This should be on my phone. And after that, I went on and actually did a research project with an AI engineer before all of this AI work, because I knew data was part of the problem. And then a really good friend of mine got stage 4 lung cancer, and another friend got MS. And they had just the same problem, which was, how do I find the most cutting edge, or what's the best things that I should be doing? And it's not just about medication, it's about the whole, where's the best doctor? Is there trials? Are there lifestyle things? When there's this complexity, they just went on this huge hunting journey. So ended up starting a tech platform. We've launched an app, and actually in the last few months we've launched probably our most exciting thing, which is our new AI product, which does all the research for you and tries to find you insights every week.
So we'll talk about that in just a moment, but I think I just want to focus for a minute on kind of this idea of navigating this minefield of information, because even when you think about 2020, in January 2020, no one, the term COVID hadn't even been coined really, and we hadn't heard of that. And yet January 2026 now, there's 500,000 research papers that mention the word COVID. You've got hundreds of millions of people around the world who've been affected by it, many with long COVID. And every day, I'm on this incredible WhatsApp group with my World Health Network colleagues, so these scientists, researchers, doctors from all over the world. And every single morning I wake up to probably 3 or 4 new research papers that are being shared on that WhatsApp group. And the volume and the speed of information that is coming at me is completely overwhelming. And also patients are constantly teaching me stuff about this and that, and I've read this and I've read it here, and I can't keep up with it. So it is impossible, I think, in this day and age, with the amount of knowledge out there with a human brain, of somebody who's got a job and a family, to keep up with every update. So when you say AI, I know that people will have lots of different experiences of using it. They will have, you'll probably have the complete noobs like me, who've been using it for a little, maybe picked it up in 2025 for the first time. You got people who have just found it's being forced on them through Facebook and WhatsApp and these companies that have introduced these AI tools, Google, whether you like it or not. Some people will find it terrifying, absolutely would terrify them. Others will think that it is just a complete massive force for evil. So there's a lot of, I would say, negative energy around AI, as well as the excitement around it. So how do we use it for good? Like, what is its role? Because there'll be a lot of skeptics out there.
It is a crazy time. I think everybody will agree, things are changing so fast in AI. And, I think there is different camps that are evolving. We are seeing people feeling hesitant. I think there is some skepticism. I know there's even a lot of pushback in the health space. And then there is, the more optimists, or people who are finding useful use cases. So the way I probably look at it is, I view it as a tool for agency. I think there's never been a better time to be living with a complex condition from a standpoint of understanding the context more quickly. And the way I'll explain, like when my son was first, both my kids were diagnosed, but my one son has a very rare type of cerebral palsy. It's really complex. It's more similar to Parkinson's. It probably took me 2 years to understand what we were dealing with. Of reading, I didn't know who to talk to. I was talking to all these different people. Sometimes I wasn't talking to the right doctor. I was talking to the nurse or this. And I always just had these questions, and I was going to all these places. And I think what AI has given us right now is the ability to get there much, much more quickly. And so I think, the first thing I look at it is agency, and like it's given me this power, and it gives patients, depending how you use it, give you this power to understand things much more quickly. And so you have more agency of knowing where to go or where not to go, or how to utilize your time with your medical professional, or find a better medical professional. So that's probably my first sort of thinking is, I view it in that light. But I will say, I don't think everyone is using or seeing how to use AI in healthcare in the same way. I think, if you are sitting in Google and you're doing a search and an AI answer comes up, it's really low quality AI. You've got to remember they're just integrating it into search. If you open up, ChatGPT, whatever your AI is, and you ask a simple question and you just get one answer back, again, I don't think you're fully utilizing what this tool can do. But the way I think it's about how do you bring together more data points more quickly? How do you get better sources? How do you get a lay of the land? Even just yesterday, a friend of mine who has ME/CFS WhatsApped to me. She was trialing a new AI tool, and it went through the 10 most recent clinical trials protocols of all the latest, of the most latest 10, and all the things that are being trialed, because she's wanting to be a bit more proactive at the moment. And it was an amazing report that I went through. And I was just thinking, do you know what that would have required like 2 years ago? You would, 3 months of work maybe, and you probably would have missed pieces, you would have missed context. So yeah, I feel really passionate that this is a tool for patients first. And I think there's a whole bunch of hesitancies, but I think there's also some sort of false dichotomies happening where people are really worried about perfection in the AI models, and they're missing sort of some bigger pieces of what this tool can do.
Yeah, and there's a lot of mistrust, I think, of these tools as well. We just don't trust them. It's like, AI is taking over the world and humans are going to become irrelevant, and there's a lot of fear around it as well. So with what you've built, because for people who don't know what you've built, can you describe what that is? Because if, say, you just use ChatGPT or Google AI, you haven't got a concept of what something like what you've built. So can you just kind of explain that in really simple terms?
Yeah, so the way we've gone about building this, so, my personal opinion, I think actually ChatGPT and OpenAI is pretty amazing, particularly if you're able to pay for the pro account, or not the pro. I actually pay just for the $30. I don't pay for the $200 a month subscription. And if you can use the deep research tools, I think it is pretty amazing. So, we kind of look at what are these other pieces that are missing. So you mentioned before about information overload. And I would say it's even bigger than that. It's not just research that is important. And you actually said it in a way that most doctors, I'm sure most people listening who are patients are like, wow, where you listen to patients. So I think patient voices are very important. I think clinicians are very important. I think research is very important, and clinical trials. So I think that the problem is even bigger. And at the moment, there's over 2,000 new things every week on long COVID alone. I don't know if you knew that every week, Binita. And I know that because the way we've chosen to use AI is not to be giving you simple answers. We call it generic health information or vanilla health information. We think it's pretty useless. And I think, at the time, the WebMD of that world model is over. It was amazing when it first came out, actually, but now it's, not very useful. And so what we've chosen to do is actually just get everything new from the last week. So we have an intelligent AI sort of system that finds everything new, categorizes it. So we use AI more to find the information, categorize it, and then to actually use algorithms to match it to someone's profile. So the current tool that we've launched is a tool where you can just tell it whatever you want. And then if you say something's on top, the next week, everything that's new will be found for you on that particular thing. And if you want to add location, there's often events, clinical trials, incredible things happening already, in the space, and we'll bring that information to you. So we are probably using AI in a more of a retrieval sense. We actually strongly believe in sources. I think knowing that is from this person, that is from this person is really important versus generic answers that are a bit more. And I think we actually really emphasize mixed opinions, and that's again because we are built by people with lived experience, and we know there isn't often one answer. And I think if you used ChatGPT a year ago, it was doing a little bit more general answers, which was less valuable. But what we do is we'll say, this expert said this expert, these patients are saying this research paper says this. There's no papers on this. So we really try and give people that experience through a weekly update and through a deep dive tool, which goes in. So at the moment we have over 200,000 sources for long COVID, and it will go across that data set, and it's updated every day, and we'll give you answers. So your podcast, for example, will come up sometimes as an answer. But
so
so much AI than just a chatbot experience right now.
Yeah, so you're intelligently mining the data rather than just going anything and any, you've got trusted sources. I think when we first spoke, which was quite a long time ago now, and I know things have moved on an awful lot, one of the things that really excited me about that conversation was you were saying that all the patient voice stuff, if I'd said to somebody 5 or 6 years ago in my day job, join that Facebook group because you'll get really good insights and real intelligence from that Facebook group, because there's a whole Facebook group on LDN or LDA and everyone's just sharing their experiences of using the drug, and you got to take some of it with a pinch of salt, but it's a good source of information. And I have been known to lurk on patient Facebook groups so I can understand what people's experience of taking these off-label drugs is, because it's a great source of information, but nobody is using that to inform the wider narrative, and it's almost dismissed because it's just patients chatting.
That's right.
Are you still using that kind of data as well?
Yeah, 100%. So we use data. We can't use Facebook data, Facebook groups. Years ago when we were talking before we built this tool, I always thought, imagine if Facebook wanted to use their groups and actually help improve health conditions. What they could do by just aggregating the data. The same question gets asked every single week in a Facebook group, and you actually get different answers week by week. So yeah, we are using that data from different sources, forums, Reddit, and we also take patient interviews off webinars and from YouTube. We take those transcripts and give people information from those sources. So yeah, I strongly believe in how do we capture patient experiences. I think if we were to look at complex conditions, what is it that's holding back? How long has it taken long COVID, for example, to even just agree on the symptoms? And therefore, there's an argument. I'm not a long COVID expert, but I've met many where maybe the trials have been poorly designed because there's, the flow and effect of this information lag is huge in terms of, and so I think, we have to be thinking, how do we capture that information more quickly, aggregate it, and, obviously doing this in a patients for, how do we use data patients for patients in sort of all these different tools and different ways you can share information.
And it's really important. I know we're talking about long COVID, but actually this tool works for lots of different conditions. So you've got a number of kind of flagship conditions, if you like, that you've launched the tool in. So ME is one of them. And then you've got other ones like Parkinson's and various other kind of neglected illnesses.
Endometriosis, lupus. So we're actually launching 2 to 3 disease states every week. And that's just because we are building these intelligent indexes and then able to give people that update every single week and be able to do these deep dives. So, this is just how we're trying to use AI. And I think, probably one story to illustrate, I was worried recently whether my children had osteoporosis, they're wheelchair users. So I went to our consultant and I said, should we be worried? And he said, no, don't worry about it. A few weeks later, my son gets very bad knee pain. They wouldn't do an x-ray, Binita, the story, it's just continuous. I made them do an x-ray. They showed, bone density problems. They told us we couldn't do a DEXA scan. I ended up getting on a trial. We got a DEXA scan and the consultant rings me and says, yes, both your children have osteoporosis. And I said, what can I do to treat this? Now, I had put that osteoporosis concern into our weekly tool. And over the last month, it had found me 2 papers and a webinar of a world leader talking about treatment. And the doctor told me, we usually wait for children to break their bones. That's how we treat osteoporosis. And when you're in a wheelchair, that's like a year of rehab for a child. Now, I said to him, why are we not looking at calcium, vitamin D deficiencies? I said, there's these 2 recent papers. And, the doctor said to me, you're right. Let's do some testing. So that is my big passion, is how do we empower people? Because nobody can stay up to date and no one cares as much as someone living with the condition. Nobody cares as much. But I also think in the kindness, that doctor is actually just a human doing their best. He is doing his best. He hasn't read any papers in the last years, probably, on osteoporosis for children with cerebral palsy, but I have. And so we are trying to, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's AI or databases, I'm just trying to, how do we get that to people when they need it and when new things come up? Because I think one of the challenges is that if people don't know something is new, and I think medical professionals really value new things, but if they haven't read it and they don't know about it, they're just instantly skeptical. And, there is a lot of evidence that's being gathered right now.
Yeah. And okay, so you've got the intelligent sort of mining tool that like pulls all this stuff together. Then how do you make that into information that's digestible to kind of the general public, essentially, and to patients who haven't got a scientific background?
Yeah. So at the moment, we give people a weekly email where we summarize the sources. We try and tell them why it's related to their profile. And actually, I mean, our product's really new. So if anyone is using it, you know, even yesterday, a friend of mine WhatsApped me a long message. She's an amazing scientist of what she thinks we could do next. You know, we are open to suggestion in that space because at the moment we give you the sources. We say, you know, on this podcast, this world leader mentioned fatigue. You know, my whole thing to my team was if a world leader is on a podcast yesterday and mentions a new thinking on fatigue at 2 hours 20, I want someone to get that insight. So at the moment, we actually just give you the insight. We don't do too much else, but there is a little bit of interpretation down the bottom. And the reason we don't do too much more is, and we will go into that space, is, and this is a challenge of AI, is how do we make sure the recommendations are accurate? You know, I think there's this, you know, when we do sourcing, we can do sourcing well, we can do summarization well, and there's a little bit of reasoning starting to happen in AI, but I am hesitant to be doing too many recommendations because I think in our team, we have this term in tech called QA, which means you check the quality of things, you build complex systems to test that things are working. It's actually really hard to test those pieces of AI. You know, we could make our weekly update all recommendations. You know, we could just take all that data for somebody and we will bring a little bit more of a summary because again, I think we try to make it easy to understand. We try to make it, hey, this is connected to this goal. So at the top, it would say for me, you know, osteoporosis, here's a paper, and there'll be like a 2-sentence or 1 sentence saying your current concerns with your son, you know. Yeah, so that's how we try to break it down. We also have an audio button so you can listen to it if that's more helpful. But yeah, we again, I think there's just so much innovation happening in this time, and there are other tools doing other pieces. I mean, I'm a big bill. I love the sort of OpenAI, Anthropic. I love what they're doing because they are moving more into this space. But we are choosing to be more in the validated sources. Aggregating, empowering people. Because again, if my consultant rings me and says osteoporosis, I can't say, you know, I can now quote a paper to him. I can now quote a webinar. I can send him those links. You know, I feel much more empowered to sort of run that conversation.
Yeah. And if you think about what we've done for decades in terms of clinical guidelines, what, you know, the way clinical guidelines are put together is you get a bunch of people together and they spend like 3 years reading all the papers and summarizing. I was involved in writing some national guidelines, you know, in my NHS world. And it was a painstaking 3-year, you know, something that was published in 2017. So it was kind of before the AI explosion. And it took 3 years with, you know, people on spreadsheets summarizing abstracts and summarizing papers, and then us putting it all together manually and then coming out with this guideline, and then implementing that guideline takes another 5 years because, you know, you got to educate people. And then it's, you know, and it's, you know, it was the national oxygen guidelines, and it was just, it was an insane process now when you think about what AI can do for you. This is no different, really.
That's right. I mean, I think that's to say, I kind of believe, you know, I'm such an advocate for AI, but I still think there's huge value in those experts sitting around that report. So like maybe there's other things they can be doing to still be adding their expertise and their voices.
Absolutely.
Coming on your
I think
podcast,
you don't have to
for example.
Yeah, and you don't have to do the manual trawl. That's the thing. That's the thing that took hours and hours and days and weeks of people's lives, and we all did it sort of on top of, you know, for free because you're passionate about the topic. So you're gathering the data, you're summarizing it, you're making it digestible, you're explaining. So I've seen some of the summaries that you've done for the research, and it, you know, it's chunked into really nice, what's this paper, what, you know, and it's like a little summary of what does this paper say, what's the main question, what are the main findings, what are the conclusions. And it's just lovely if you've got a big paper and you just haven't got time to read the whole thing. And then you've got various experts you bring on board as well. And I've done a few, I did one for you, didn't I, where you've got people just talking through things. So there's a lot of, the app has got a lot of different things on it, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we have a community app, and that app is still live. It's actually not live in all our disease states, But the sort of we're calling it our Turnto product is the AI web searching tool is separate. And that's because we want to just launch it to lots of disease states because we're getting requests to share it more broadly. And I think also, there's this, we're a really small tech team. We're trying to work out how do we bring the most value to people. And we think, your interview, like for example, there are just so much rich sources of deep interviews happening already. And so, how do we capture those pieces of information? I had this funny moment. We recently were working on our agents. It's just an AI term that we're in YouTube looking at new sources. And we have like 11 points of criteria when we're analysing the captions of that interview. And the day before, there'd been a well-known physio had put a really badly filmed video from an international conference. She'd been in that week on a very deep topic in cerebral palsy, and obviously it made it through our agents. And I remember seeing it and just having this moment that I had to fly around the world to learn it, to get access into these webinars, these 2-hour whatever the sessions are, and no one was filming it. It wasn't being shared with patients. And so I just feel so excited that some of these, the experts are coming to the table more and more. But it is also this overwhelm. I think there is so much happening. And I think, where I'm thinking about where do we go where we can aggregate it more? Because, I think there's still this complexity of all the new things coming. And I mean, you see this all the time in your clinic. How do you make you can't try everything all at once. You have to still be able to make those, and sometimes you need to do nothing for a period. There's all these real life complexities living with the health condition. So I don't think AI or any of these tools are the answer at all for the wonderful answer. I think it's a tool of agency. It's a tool of not spending 2 years, but maybe spending 3 weeks to get your head around what's happening for yourself. It's knowing that your local healthcare professional is not the right one because they're telling you there's nothing you can do. I think it's about those moments more quickly. And then, can this technology begin to transform those data pipelines, speeding up what trials we do or improving the trial selections or all these sort of terrible mistakes that happen that push progress back. And so people have, really life impacting, impacts from that stuff not being shared or aggregated.
Yeah, I think we have a long way to go, probably, Jess, in terms of the medical community accepting this kind of thing. There's that awful, you can buy the mugs, can't you? Don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. It's like the most arrogant kind of slogan you can possibly imagine for doctors, because it just completely dismisses patient research and lived experience. Yeah. And I think we've got a long way to go culturally in the medical community to accept somebody coming to you with their own research. And I think a lot of healthcare professionals would feel very threatened and defensive about that. And that's often the reaction they'll get if they challenge and say, well, actually, there's this paper and this paper, rather than, oh, that's amazing, leave it with me, I'll have a look, and we should be embracing this. I think this. So I guess, I think it's just to make people cautious that if they go with these searches and things, it may not always be received really well, but hopefully that will change.
I'm seeing really good signs. I don't have a perfect medical team. I'm working in a public system and a private system for my own kids. And, we had a really kind of hesitant doctor that we worked with recently who was much more open-minded. He's using an AI scribe service. So I think he's seeing the benefit of that. And he actually gave us a new diagnosis recently. And like in the appointment, I'm like, hey, let's do a deep research while we're talking. Because, my son has a lot of coincidences. I'm like, is there anyone else with these different genetic things? And we actually did the deep research. And at the end, actually, we talked about the findings. And he would never have been open to this a year ago.
Yeah, amazing.
So I was so encouraged that, there is that more. How do you go to a while back I was involved in being a patient advocate for some stem cell work, and it was very, very depressing because at the end of it they ended up doing a very They ended up putting out guidelines to professionals across Australia, very, very dissuading people in this particular thing. But I knew the world leader who was actually having a very different opinion. But I said to this team, when someone comes into the office and asks about a cutting edge thing, that's your moment to like become a collaborator. They're the most active people. They're feeling the pain point. But if you just dismiss them entirely, they are now on their own, vulnerable to these clinics that are all across the world. And maybe the clinics are good, maybe they're bad. I'm no opinion here, but they're not regulated, and they could be the wrong protocol, could be the wrong dose, all these different things. So I feel so passionately about that collaboration. But it is, I'm hopeful that some of these AI scribe tools are going to make people more open-minded. And maybe patients have more agency and they have the context better. You'll also have better questions. And it's not on the patient. But you might know, hey, this doctor isn't going to know anything about this. So like, I'm going to go to someone else, because we expect so much in those consultations. And I just, even a month ago, I spoke to somebody who had long COVID and they'd waited, I think, 18 months to get into this long COVID clinic in Canada. And they went along and it was the most depressing thing of their life. They were just, the story so well, Binita. And it's so sad. And then that feeling of leaving and
having no agency.
And you just feel like you're completely alone and you're never no one is trying anything, that there's, and so I just want to change that. It's all of us, how do we change those? And they're the clinics for long COVID,
And so very practically, if somebody, because, what's the difference between me tapping something into ChatGPT and, if I've got the sort of the paid version and your tool, very practically, what's the benefits of going on to a kind of a bespoke tool that's for this particular thing? Is it the sourcing? Is it the sources? Is it more reliable sources?
I think it's actually, and there's heaps of tool out there. And I think, we're one of many great things happening. Our particular tool is about proactive. So our tool proactively reads everything new a week for you. It reads, and it even sends agents searching for new trials for you. So once a week, you get 10 sources that our tool finds across 2,000 or sometimes up to 3,000 sources. So ChatGPT and a lot of these tools, which are amazing, can be amazing, cannot be, but they can be, it's about how you prompt them and, they are getting better at sourcing. But our tool is about, we were like, how do we do 100 hours of work for somebody, 100 hours of reading, and we give them, this 10 sources that are relevant for you. So that's what the difference is. And also, if you do want to deep dive, the difference is you won't get a vanilla answer. You'll get 20 sources. You'll get different opinions from patients, different opinions from experts, different opinions. And again, it's because we value those human. And it's funny, in a time of AI, I think human has never been more valuable. That's our difference with our particular tool. Is those two things, is proactive.
Absolutely. So it's kind of, you're not having to rely on putting the right prompts in. That's huge, actually.
Or you might miss something. You might, for example, small things, I'm obsessed with innovative tech equipment because, 2 kids using wheelchairs, and we actually now, and because I'm obsessed with it, we have amazing mobility devices. My one son's looks like a skateboard thing. It's so cool. So I put that into my weekly tool and it finds me random threads of patients talking about new equipment because I really care about new equipment, and I just always want to see what's coming, what's more light, what's faster, what's, all these things, because I care about that.
Yeah. And so how do people access? Obviously, we'll put the details of your tool, which, as you said, is one of many, and there's lots of great stuff out there, but we'll put the details of yours underneath the session on the channel. How do people access your tool?
So people can access the tool through the link. The tool costs $2 a week to use it. You can actually try it for free for 3 weeks. We have a scholarship program if you can't afford it, we really believe. And, for us as a team, we've tried to build the lowest cost possible. It actually costs $2.80 a week for these weekly updates. So we will hopefully improve our tech to bring the cost down. But I guess it's this sense of we do really care. But in this, moment in time, it's how do we use these powers to do really useful tasks. So you can come in, you can try it for 3 weeks, see if it's useful for you. And any feedback is very, very welcome because it's a new product.
And the app is, the community app's free, isn't it?
The app's free. That'll always be free. It just won't have some of those pieces. So there's a lot of things happening in there. a lot of different discussions. But yeah, we are a really small team, so we are focused more on this new piece, but we do want to keep those free tools and that value going.
Yeah, and just for bringing Helen back on, last question is kind of what are you excited about in the next couple of years, where like, because things are moving so incredibly fast, like what's exciting you right now?
Yeah, I think I'm just so excited about how do we close the gap between patients missing out on things that, you know, things that are available today. I think there's this immediate problem, and then there's this future problem. And I think the immediate problem is there are things many conditions, there are things you can be doing today, but you don't know about them. You know, when my kids were diagnosed, I asked everybody, what should we be doing? What should we be doing? And then years later at that big academic conference, I learned about these incredible interventions at home that were available when my kids were that age, like that all the scientists were excited about. And to this day, children are missing out on across the world. So I think what is available today excites me. How are these AI tools going to be speeding that up? And secondly, you know, that gap we mentioned between what we don't know. We don't know a lot of things. We don't have the funding for the big trials. You know, we've got to remember research, clinical trials takes years to pull it together, to recruit, you know, to fund it. And so, you know, there's just so much lag in healthcare and in treatments that could be helping right now. So I think my future hope is this technology gets put into the pipeline of treatments. You know, I have a very good friend, I haven't mentioned it yet, but I had ME/CFS 14 years ago, very severely for 2 years. And it was, you know, it's like being an alien on this world because you lose every single thing. And yet, you know, you're completely, you know, it's a health crisis that I really, you know, believe in. And I have a very good friend recently who's got long COVID, and she has deteriorated so much. And I just think, what hope, and how do we help these very serious conditions that haven't had enough attention, have had all these different issues? Yeah, that's my hope. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Jess. I'm gonna bring Helen back on. We have, because we've moved the time, because of the time difference with Australia, we're doing the session much later this evening than usual, and so we haven't had the same number of questions and audience views that we have maybe had on other sessions. But we have got Helen, who's been keeping an eye on things, and I'm sure has got some questions herself.
Yeah.
Over to you.
I do. Thank you so much. It is really interesting. There's so much, such a varied interpretation of what AI even is from various people, and their introduction to it can have such a big impact. First impressions, of course, is a big thing. So it's really good to, you know, discuss it in a more balanced way and see the good that can come of it, because, you know, I passionately believe that there is huge potential for amazing good as well. So, you know, it's making sure that it is safeguarded to do that good though. So yeah, thank you for that work. There are a few more questions coming in first. Before we go into that, I will just say, you didn't mention it, and I thought you would, but when you said about the what's the phrase again? I forgot, you said it at the time and my brain fog is getting me now, but about the don't confuse your
medical degree with my Google search.
Yeah. But the patient response being, don't confuse your 1 hour lecture with my years of 24/7 lived experience, you know.
Yeah.
But that could go a step further, couldn't it? You know, with using AI. It reminds me of when I was at uni, as I'm sure it has with you as well, of, you know, having access to the library and all the books are there, all the information is there, but which book do you pick up first, and which chapter do you go to first? And all this is doing on a basic level is signposting you to the correct chapter, you know, and so you get that information. So it's good.
It kind of links to this other thing we spoke about before we hopped on, which is, you know, I love that whoever wrote that 1 hour lecture versus my life. I love that. And I think for me, it draws on this bigger thing. I'm so passionate right now is that people are honing in on accuracy in AI, which we should be. You know, we should be wanting sourcing and accuracy, and particularly when there's no source given. However, you know, the healthcare system is so broken. Like, why we're comparing completely different things. We are forgetting our family have had 10 major medical misadventures alone, not even our minor ones. from humans making mistakes. So I think I'm just so passionate about we aren't looking at the healthcare system honestly. When we're looking at these AI tools, we are forgetting the 75-80% incredibleness of the content, and much better than most. It does very well in the tests, but I think those tests have got this whole other debate there about being trained for the tests and the rest of it. However, I think it's this,
and that's no reflection on individuals working in the healthcare at all. Obviously, people are working there to save lives and do amazing things, and they are doing amazing things all day, every day, and it's wonderful. This is just a support.
I agree, Helen. It's data points and complex things and limited time and people being overwhelmed, and you have a rare disease or you have an unusual thing, you don't fit in the clean bucket. So what do you do about it?
Yeah. I would like to ask the audience a question, actually. So we'll move on to some other things, but while we move on, if people could write in the chat, would be really useful. But I would be really curious to know what features people would find useful in an app. And the reason I say this is because I sometimes shoot myself in the foot, because I set things up and I want things to come in a certain way, and I'll be having a good day and I'll be like, right, I want to list all of these things, I want to keep track of all of these symptoms, and then the next day that's it, game over, I can't keep track of any of it, and then the consistency's lost. And that could apply to getting the research in. It's all well and good getting all this information every day, but you need to be able to access it cognitively every single day, and if you can't, then you might miss really key things. So safeguarding that, for me, that would be a really useful tool. For example, I just wondered what other people would find really useful. I'd be interested to know.
And don't feel bad, Helen, like tracking apps are what I like to call like tar pit ideas, other than Visible, which I think is one of the best things because they do it passively. Whatever your opinion is, I really, really like Harry. But I think, when it's active, when you have to go in all the time, like they all fail. So it's not you, Helen. It's every single.
I set myself up too many symptoms on there. I think that was what I was thinking of. I was good intentions.
I always
we're big fans. We're big fans of Visible, but I agree with you, Jess. Those apps, I think there's probably like 10% who have the personality to do something where you have to interact with it really aggressively.
I always thought we should do time blocks of tracking, do 1 week and then have a break for like 3 months, because I think we can do that. And it's also, it's complex.
And of course, long COVID can bring out neurodivergence more severely, and that, of course, can affect your ability to do things like that. So it's no reflection on the patients, it's just a thing that happens. We live and learn.
So we've got a question from Leanne. She said she uses AI. It's a lot about the prompts used, as we've discussed, as to answer just one wrong word and it becomes biased. How do you avoid it so answers are the best truth rather than biased? I guess it's a question about prompts. This is a great question. It's really hard.
Yeah. So I would say like a few things. The first thing I'd say was, prompts do matter. So I use the voice button. I'm very audible. And so then I can just talk and say, they used to say, you should say you're a world leading long COVID expert. I'd like to learn about, this thing, give me mixed opinions and source it all. Like that would be a really good prompt, for example. However, I would say, the nature of going back and forth, I think going back and forth is really important to push. I always say push the AI, like it's giving, no, go back and find it. Get me the source. Where is this? Find me 10 different examples. I think getting it to use its power to find the good information and less on just always giving you a quick answer. I will also say, if you haven't used it, there's a deep research feature in a lot of the chat tools, which I highly recommend. I think you get a few each month for free. But I think the concept of bias is a very big problem in these chat box. There's this weird thing, you get really validated, and you get your answer, you're like, yes, it is hard. Thank you. No one says that to me. But at the same time, it can really, so I think using words like mixed evidence, find me the sources, get me papers on this, find me 10 different people writing about this. I think I would encourage that from people. You try the deep research prompt. I think it can be really good for sourcing, but also use it, go back and forth and push it, and do realize, bias. It is there. It is getting better, though. I will say that it is getting better. But my husband and I, we're really into AI. We debate all the time when we actually don't even debate facts anymore. Oh, let's look it up. And then my husband, what was your prompt? Like, was that biased? And then we'll look at it and go, yeah, that was a really biased prompt.
I think what you said about I think I'm way too polite with AI. I think I'm being very British about it and not wanting to, so I think being bossy and giving it a hard time and really interrogating it is kind of the way forward.
I always say one of my favorite prompts is give me a table and then I'll be like, these are the things I'm looking at, accuracy, evidence. Give me a table, find me 3 reliable sources, and then I'll do it. And they'll be like mixed. No. I want every single link to work and give me the reference for that link. So that's how I use it. I go back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, it's a great starting point, and then you can fact check it yourself from a safeguarding point of view. That's the thing to always remember.
Yes,
definitely, 100%. Really important point, Helen.
Yeah.
So we've got a question from Nigel. Another great question. So you've talked a lot about using the tool to help support and help patients. Do you have any thoughts about how it might be used to increase awareness too, which obviously is so important for our charities and the patient groups?
Yeah, I guess, I think this, how do we create awareness about anything? I think there is about running campaigns. It's about all of us. I had a situation about 2 months ago where my one son illegally lost all his care package in Australia, illegally lost all his care. And I used AI to lodge 8 different complaint. I documented my story. I created all the documentation. We ended up winning the case because it was illegal. Some young person, not that I'm against young people, but it was some unqualified person had just decided that someone with severe cerebral palsy needs no care. So I think I would say, how do we use it for advocacy? I think there's never been a better time to be putting things together, to be creating submissions, to be having ideas. I think sometimes we all get stuck. I got really stuck when this happened with my son. And so I just went hard on trying to understand what had happened, what are my rights, where, I used AI to say, give me the exact piece in the legislation. And I found the legislation, I actually PDF'd it and I put it into the chat, what exactly in the legislation is protecting our rights. So I think that's how I would say AI can help, as well as generating content and all these different pieces. But I also think, it's never been a more important time to be human. I think our faces, our stories, our experiences are not generic AI summaries. I think your story matters. I think we have so many stories of, and one thing I'm just really passionate about is the idea of blind spots. At the moment, a lot of big AI companies are moving to health, which is really exciting. And you read their news, their press releases, and they're like, we've consulted hundreds of experts. And I'm like, what about the patients? Because if we build these models on healthcare models, it's great for medical and scientific information. But I'm really passionate about blind spots. Like, how many blind spots does the healthcare system have? And so, how do we tell our stories of these blind spots? Because they should be shaping also these technologies.
Absolutely, and it's safeguarding those blind spots as well, and then being aware of the accuracy as also, because if a blind spot is a patient's voice, that's not a peer review paper. So there's a real grey area there of really important information that is factually accurate. It just hasn't been fact checked, opposed to stuff that is out there, maybe guidelines that are out of date, that are still in place, that are being used daily, that haven't been retrained yet, and are stuck in the system where people are not specialists in those areas. And it's a real grey area of trying to navigate that. And I think a lot of, sorry, I don't go into the question, but a lot of AIs do mirror, of course, a lot. And so they only have the information that they've got. And if those stories are not out there anywhere, they're not going to have that. So there is a real grey area. And I was curious, actually, with your app, if you had any, and it's an impossible question, so maybe don't even answer it. But but it's catch-22 thing of how do you safeguard if something is accurate, or how do you know if it is not yet proven? We don't teach the 4 humours in medical training anymore. You know, we've moved on.
It piggybacks onto this next question, actually, Helen, which is, you know, how do you ensure that if there's concerns within the community comments, you can then view comment and potentially pull content if it could do harm? And there's, you know, one of the other platforms has had this issue where it's pulling information that's seen as potentially harmful because it's certain, you know, pushing graded exercise therapy and these sorts of things in ME. So I think it's sort of part of the same question about accuracy, but also harm. It's a great question, Jo.
Yeah, I think there's never been a better time to try and solve this. It's such a complex problem. You know, when I started thinking about this years ago and how do we bring this together in an AI research project, I knew there was no way to fully solve this. And I mean, long COVID is the most complex condition in the sense that there is such polarization even in the literature. So, you know, you could say, well, we just grade all the literature sourcing, but that doesn't actually work when there's agendas at play behind some of this funding. What we did in the app is we actually did create a thing called contentious comments. So if someone mentions graded exercise, it actually comes up with an orange flag. It actually, some comments are instantly hidden when they mention, you know, cures or different things that are considered harmful. In our new AI tool where it finds everything new, we have a little bit of that built in, and we're actually leaning more into that as we're going into new disease states as well. How do we have the nuanced moderation that's needed without, you know, without being too controlling? And I think, you know, this is why there's so much value in long COVID support Facebook group, because, you know, there is the expertise in that group, and how do we pull that expertise out into what we're building? We're trying by listening to advocates. We're trying by, you know, our system is like lots and lots of moderation to try and get that quality and to remove some of those pieces. But it is, you know, you can go on YouTube and learn anything you want. You can go on TikTok and get all of your health information. And there's always this eternal challenge. What is quackery or the next latest thing? But the hope I have is that maybe we can more quickly get to, well, there's actually some really interesting scientific concepts behind this concept. So if you ask a question in our deep dive tool of a contentious thing, you will get mixed opinions on that. But yeah, it is complex. We're trying our best, but it is complex. I'm not going to...
Essentially, it's safety in numbers as well, isn't it? Because if AI is mirroring, it's not like back in the day where it's Bob down the pub says such and such because his uncle did that and it worked for him. Now we've got millions of people all around the world, and surely that will filter out some safety elements within it, you know.
100%. I mean, it's all over, you know, even Reddit. Like Reddit is incredible for, you know, smashing these things. There was a really contentious documentary recently in cerebral palsy that was put on Netflix about this potential cure, and it's a lot of quackery around this. And, you know, we were pulling in all the Reddit comments of advocates pushing back because we actually didn't have papers to say there wasn't any. So yeah, it's exactly, Helen. You know, when I had ME/CVS 14 years ago, my mum would ring me and tell me some really interesting things I should be doing every single week.
Was it yoga?
Well, I think there's that famous Rumi quote, isn't there? Like somewhere between right and wrong, there's a garden, and I'll see you there. Because I think, you know, you could say there's always a bit of truth to everything, and the real truth is somewhere in the middle. And so having those mixed opinions is super important, because actually no one's 100% wrong and no one's 100% right, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And all you can do is get the closest to that as you can.
We've got a starting point to fact check. Can't repeat it enough.
Absolutely. We've got some answers coming into your question.
I was seeing that as well. It's great. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. So Melanie's put, I'd prefer a condensed version, something easy to read and understand due to brain fog. And
I think you've got spades of, you've got that in spades, haven't you, Jess?
Yeah, so we have a 3-minute audio you can listen to. You can just press play and it will tell you your 10, 12 sources that found you for the week. And again, it could be better in the sense of it's just summarizing the sources. We could do a little bit more higher level, like, hey, there's this end of the day, like there can be a week where nothing is really that important for you, and that's where actually we want our tool to get to. We want it to get to that point. But I think, how do we condense it? That's a thing we are thinking about. And that's why we released this new platform, because what we were learning from the app is coming in, people coming in for 10 minutes each day. It's a lot of time a week. And then people don't come in and they feel they've missed out. And we wanted to alleviate that feeling. And also you get unwell, you're dealing with different things going on. So, yeah.
And Leanne's kind of mentioned about wanting things to be saved in date order and, you know, but she gets lots of information, takes lots of effort, gets tired and leaves, and then the search is gone. You can't retrieve it. But that's a lot of these AI tools can save stuff, which is great.
That's right. Yeah, we can save it. We actually have this one thing. We think, tell us if you want it, where we email you all your deep dives. So you've got it in your email sitting there. We're not sure if we should keep it. So tell us. Yeah.
And then a final question from Leanne about whether the platform assesses the quality of the evidence, like maybe a system, you know, maybe like grade A or grade B or grade C. Yeah. I don't think you can do that in the same way as a traditional.
Yeah. We would actually really like to go there. Our app actually does a much better job at the moment than our other product. At the moment, we focus on summarizing, but where we want to go is we would actually like to have, you know, end of the day, structured data is really important. So we would actually like to give a condition context on every source. So, for example, if your podcast comes up, we actually would like to say Dr. Binita Kane is this in the long COVID world, and we could apply that to research as well. I mean, we do in the app, we actually do say this is a case study and this is the quality. You know, this is in a less, a more highly reviewed journal to give people that sense. So we have done that a little bit there, but we have talked as a team about going into that space of understanding the landscape. And the reason this is so challenging is platforms like YouTube and certain disease states have so many creators. And the people who get to the top of the algorithm when you search is not the most reliable person, not often. It can be anybody. It can be somebody selling a program or whatever it is that's what's happening. And so we want to work out how do we give people that can do, because, you know, we can create a structured data set where we do aggregate the key players. Because, you know, you would all know who are the most exciting scientists is long COVID. If you're just diagnosed, you don't know that. And you may never know that. You may come onto one Instagram post and start following someone. It could be amazing. It could not be. So yeah, we would like to go there.
Brilliant. There's a couple of final points I'd like to make and then hand over to Helen if she's got anything else. Number one, sustainability. So my kids now, ironically, they've probably seen it on TikTok or something, gone, oh, you shouldn't be using ChatGPT, Mum, because it's, you know, it's really bad for the planet. And I'm like, oh God, yeah, I know. And I've got all this stuff on Dropbox, and it's just, you know, you do start feeling bad about what we're doing to the planet with all these engines. What's your view on that?
I think it's a really valid point. I mean, I think as someone who believes so much in this, I don't think you can ignore that. I think it's a huge concern. I think there is there's always the tech, the tech optimist view is, well, technology will solve this. You know, there is already huge changes happening in, if you look at energy generation and how we change some of these processing chips and all these things. And I think there's a huge move there. How do we use less processing? So I think it is a real problem. I think people should be raising it. I think my other thought is, for someone with a lived condition, you also have to fly sometimes. You also actually do have an impact on the environment. By being unwell, by being on that journey of finding information. And so sometimes a few queries with an AI is actually a lot less than 2 years of travel. So I don't think it's as clean cut as yes or no, but I do think about it. And I know some people, it is a very important thing that people need to be pushing back on. And, you know, I was challenged last week by using AI myself with someone's child on a really silly question. Like, why did I ask that? That was lazy of me, and it was using a lot of energy. So I think it's a real fine balance.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say one final thing around kind of a healthy level of searching versus becoming completely obsessed with searching for answers, which when someone's very, very ill, that sometimes becomes an obsession because you want to get well, and then it becomes almost an unhealthy habit, which then the more you read, the more it fuels fear and anxiety about different things. And just for people to be mindful of that balance, because when you're in this information overwhelm, it's very easy to get into that cycle.
I agree. And, you know, it's really funny. It's actually one of the motivations behind our weekly product is 5 minutes versus 4 hours. You know, I once met a health consumer who said every single day she opens every single Facebook group and reads every single comment in case a new treatment has been mentioned. Every single day she does this. Now, I understand why. Like, I've been there. You know, I think we have this experience, but I think how do we get to, you know, what do I feel now managing my kids? I probably feel way less anxiety because I know the landscape. I know we're not missing out on anything. You know, I think that's the big question. When people feel like they're missing out on something, you will do these habits that are unhealthy and could trigger your I mean, you know, when I personally had ME/CFS 14 years ago, I couldn't use my eyesight. I had severe sort of photophobia, so I couldn't read anything. So I actually couldn't do the research, and I think many people are in that camp as well, and there were less audio options. So I think it's a really important thing, and there are times when you just don't need to be reading about it. You know, there are times when you have to find other parts of your humanity in your life. And
well, look, I think it's a really great place to finish. Helen, do you want to just say?
Yeah, no, I was just say so important. I think you know, just keep it healthy. You know, it's important.
But it's late where we are. Jess, you've had an incredibly early morning where you are, and we're very, very grateful for you giving up your time to talk to us. Thank you so much. We'll share the links underneath the session. So I'm going to call it there. And we will see. I'll be back in February with a session with Dr. Andrew Klein on B12 and B12 deficiency, which will be super interesting. So thanks very much, everyone, and good night.
Thank you so much.
bye.
Bye.